Hey everyone, it's Grandmaster Ben Finegold here for Kid Chess, and I wanted to show you one of my favorite games, but I don't want to show you the whole game. I just want to show you what I consider the important part of the game. White is a very strong French Grandmaster, Etienne Bacrot. He's probably been one of the top three players in France for at least the last 20 years. And if I remember correctly, which is unlikely, he became a grandmaster very young, like 14 or 15. Hope it's not 13 and I'm making him feel bad. Anyway, he was a very good, talented junior player. Probably the best he ever got was about 20th in the world, but he's always been one of the top players in France. And Black is a very famous player, five-time world champion Vichy Anand from India. And I've been friends with Vichy since 1986 when we met in England. Okay. And this is one of my favorite Anand games because his opponent makes a move that stops Anand from doing what he wants to do, but it didn't stop him. So, I mean, to me, it was incredible. Okay, now this position is pretty funny to me because the pawn structure is exactly the same. They both have 4 pawns on the king side. They both have a C pawn. They both have an A pawn. So that seems pretty equal, okay? And the computer says it's pretty equal. Okay, and even though it's pretty equal, the game ends in 6 moves, and white loses everything. Okay, so that's the way chess is. Sometimes in chess, everything's fine. Then the next move, it's not fine. And if you watch other sports, like baseball, football, hockey, soccer, if it's a really close game, it's unlikely that in 5 seconds it's a blowout, but that can happen in chess. 1 or 2 bad moves, and it's over. Okay, so Bacrot played a good move, played e4. The knight's in the center. He's like, hit the road, knight, get out of there. I don't want you there. And Anand's like, all right, plays knight b6. Anand has a lot of pieces that can go to c4. Okay, that's not a bad square. The reason it's not a bad square is if something goes to c4, you can't kick them out with a pawn. If the knight goes to c4, bishop goes to c4, a white pawn can't attack it. So it's sort of annoying for white. Anyway, white played another move that was okay. Bishop to e3, attacking the queen. Very good play. And Anand obviously doesn't want to lose his queen. And he makes a really long move, queen h5. Okay, and this position, white started making bad moves. Okay, white tried to win the game quickly instead of playing, sort of normal moves. Now here, Anand has a really interesting trick. If white just normally says, oh, I'm going to win a pawn. I'm up a pawn. Great. Okay, actually Anand doesn't recapture on b6. After bishop takes knight, instead of taking back, he can actually move his rook and pin the bishop to the queen. The bishop can't move because you'll lose your queen. Then he can take the bishop next move and not lose a pawn. That was one of Anand's tricks. Okay, now white, he didn't want to do that. He wanted to win this pawn. That c6 pawn, that's not defended by anything. It's all by itself. In fact, it's the only pawn in the black position that's not protected. So Bacrot said, give me that pawn. Rook d6. I want that pawn. All right? And Anand said, oh, that's fine. You can take that pawn. It doesn't bother me. And he played knight to c4. He started attacking. And he's attacking the rook, attacking the bishop. The bishop's defended. Okay. And in this position, white made the losing move. Okay. The correct move, which only a computer could find, is queen to d1. The queen is attacking this queen, and if they trade queens, then I can save my rook. And the computer says this is an equal position. Okay, queen d1 was the best move, but when Bacrot played rook d6, he didn't want to retreat. He wanted to take everything. He's like, that stuff is mine. I want it. So he took. Rook takes c6. He said, I'm up a pawn. All right, great. Okay, and Anand played knight takes e3. Also possible, which Anand didn't play, is knight a5, forking the queen and rook. That's also a good move. Could have done that. But Anand played for more. And we talked about this in previous videos. What's worth more than the queen? What's worth more than the rook? The king. And you're thinking, the king? White's king is really safe. As I said when the video started, sometimes things are safe, then 1 second later, they're not safe anymore. That happens in chess. So Anand played knight takes e3, and he was thinking, well, if you take this way, that's terrible. Look at that terrible pawn structure, okay? And, that's not the pawn structure White wants. And Bacrot said, oh, no, I'm not going to take that knight. I'm going to take this bishop, okay? So White took that c6 pawn. White's still up a pawn, okay? And unfortunately, taking that bishop is the losing move. Okay, now you've noticed these pieces are pretty active. Those pieces aren't so active. So Anand played rook a b8, attacking the queen. The queen doesn't have a lot of squares to go to. Obviously, we can't stay on the b file. That's where the rook is. And we can't go to these squares because the knight's protecting them. Okay? So we don't have a lot of choice. We can either go to a3 or a4. And a3 seems a bit silly because knight c2 would fork the queen and rook. Okay, so Bacrot's like, all right, I got one choice. Queen a4, what's the big deal? Okay. And Anand played rook to b2, activating his rook. Now, the most obvious move for White is to take a free knight. And obviously, both grandmasters saw that possibility. Now, White makes a battery on the 7th rank, queen e2, and that battery is so strong that mate is unstoppable. And it makes sense that mate is unstoppable. Look at White's pieces. That's not good defense of his king. And now we're threatening queen takes checkmate. There's nothing you can do. The queen and rook are coming in. There's no defense. If you save your bishop, let's say with here, then I got this checkmate. And if you don't like that checkmate, I got the reverse. I got this checkmate. Okay, and there's other checkmates too. Okay, the queen and the rook battery on the 7th rank, that's deadly. Okay, so Bacrot's not taking that knight. And Bacrot's like, you know what? I got to stop queen e2. Queen e2 is a really strong move, lining up the queen and the rook on the 7th rank. For example, if it was black's turn to move here, queen e2 is crushing. There's no move for white. Let's make a silly move, a3. Queen e2. How do you stop queen takes f2 check? I don't know. If you play rook f1, the knight can take it. So queen e2 is winning. And Bacrot said, I don't want my opponent to play queen e2. So he played a move that stopped queen e2. He played rook e1. No more queen e2. Okay, and this is why this is one of my favorite games. It was sort of a boring position where the computer said it was equal, and Bacrot said, oh boy, I'm going to go win a pawn. Okay, and while he was winning a pawn, Anand activated his pieces all to attack the white king. And now black made an amazing move. Now, I can only imagine, Bacrot, the guy who was white, when Anand played this move, what was going through his head. He was thinking, rook e1, that stops queen e2. And then Anand played queen e2. And obviously, from Anand's point of view, that's beautiful, it's amazing, etc. But I feel bad for his opponent. His opponent just stopped queen e2. Now, obviously, queen takes f2 is a threat. Queen takes e1 is a threat. Too many threats. And the obvious move, rook takes, now we play rook b1 check. Uh-oh. And bishop f1, rook takes is checkmate. You don't see that checkmate too often. In fact, I'm not sure I've ever seen that checkmate. And you can block with the queen, and you can block with the rook. That doesn't really help. Black just takes all the pieces. So queen e2 is an amazing move from the future world champion, 5-time world champion Vishy Anand. He wasn't world champion yet during this game, but he would become later, obviously. And that's an amazing attack coming out of nowhere. Black's pieces weren't very aggressive. Anand put them all aggressively, sacrificed his queen, and white had no defense. Just amazing. I mean, I feel bad for white, but a great queen sacrifice from Anand. There's no defense to the white king. Maybe next time Bacro won't put his big pieces on the A file when his king is all the way over here. Not good defense from Bacro. Once again, an amazing checkmate with the knight on E3. And the rook controls the back rank. Just beautiful. Well, I hope you enjoyed that game as much as I did. Probably not as much as Anand, but more than Bacro. This is Grandmaster Ben Finegold for Kid Chess. Until next time, bye kids.